They say you can't escape him. And on Wednesday afternoon, the Twins certainly could not, as Cedric Mullins hit a two-run walk-off homer to complete the Orioles sweep over Minnesota. I'll recap the win and dive into Albert Suárez's impressive Orioles debut coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Orioles fans, today is Thursday, April 18th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 4-2 walk-off win over the Minnesota Twins on Wednesday afternoon to complete their sweep. Talk about Cedric Mullins' walk-off homer, Albert Suárez being great in his O's debut, and much more. And then I'm going to dive even deeper into Albert Suárez because he came up to replace Tyler Wells for the start on Wednesday, and we thought this could just be a spot start, but then he dazzled. So can Suarez stick around in the Orioles rotation or at least on the team for the long haul this year? We'll get to that coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. So we start today with an Orioles victory. Final score from Oriole Park at Camden Yards. On Wednesday afternoon, the Orioles 4 and the Minnesota Twins 2 as the O's complete the three-game sweep at home against Minnesota, go 4-2 in this mini homestand and get to 12-6 through 18 games this season. They were very, very close to finishing Wednesday in first place. Had the Yankees lost, the Blue Jays had a 4-2 lead over the Yankees going into the top of the ninth. Blue Jays bullpen completely melted down, gave up 4 runs. The Yankees won, so New York still a half game ahead of the Orioles for first place in the AL East, but we are still in mid-April, so we're not looking at the standings too close. Would have been nice to be in first place, but either way, the O's have won 7-9, and they're playing some very good baseball right now. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles 4-2 walk-off win over the Twins on Wednesday afternoon. The first thing you need to know is Cedric Mullins was the hero and hit his first career walk-off home run on Wednesday afternoon. Coming up big in the ninth inning. Mullins, who I've already highlighted in this series, because if you remember, on Monday night in Game 1, he had that incredible catch in center field. He also had a big day at the plate. And he just continues to have a great series. And honestly, it's been a great stretch for Cedric Mullins. But let's start with the home run because he comes up in a big spot. 2-2 in the bottom of the ninth. Ryan Mountcastle had just gotten a one-out single. And he's facing Griffin Jax, who, with Joan Duran out, you could argue Jax is the best reliever in the Twins bullpen. And Jax just hangs a changeup. And Cedric Mullins, when he gets a hanging changeup, he's generally all over it. And that's exactly what happened. Hits it out to right center field onto the flag court for a walk-off homer, 102.6 miles per hour off the bat, traveled 379 feet for the 2-run walk-off shot. And I got to say, impressive by the Orioles. The new hydration station, which is the new home run celebration, the O's brought it to home plate. And before they mobbed Mullins, what he did immediately after touching home was take a drink from the hydration station. Then the mobbing began. Love to see it. The old Dong Bong is now out in the bullpen. Melanie Newman had a good report, I believe, during Tuesday's game about how each relief pitcher takes a hitter in the lineup. And if your hitter hits a homer, you drink from the Dong Bong in the bullpen. The O's are having a lot of fun right now. That was certainly a very fun win. And let me tell you, Cedric Mullins is having a lot of fun. That was his 5th homer of the year, which ties for the Orioles team lead. He's also got 3 stolen bases. Now, it's tough to project out a whole season when you're 18 games in. But if Cedric Mullins stayed on this pace, he would hit 45 home runs and steal 27 bases this year. That would be a pretty good season for Cedric Mullins. And the way he's swinging it right now, he is looking closer and closer to the 30-30 all-star version of Cedric Mullins that we saw in 2021. He's on a 9-game hitting streak. He's 11 for 29. That's a 379 average in that streak with 3 homers and 6 ribbies. The dude is swinging the bat well, and there's not a lot of pressure on him because he's not hitting first anymore. He's hitting, 6, 7, 8 in the Oriole order and is looking good doing it. Second thing you need to know from the Orioles win on Wednesday is that it wasn't just Cedric Mullins. The Orioles home run party as a team continued, hitting 3 home runs in this game, which accounted for all 4 of their runs, which makes it 5 consecutive games now that the Orioles have hit at least 3 home runs. That is second all-time in Orioles history. That is second all-time in MLB history. The O's tied their other record with the game on Tuesday. Last time they had hit 3+ homers in 4 straight games was May of 2013. You got to go back to the 1987 Orioles to find a team that has done this more than the O's. The only team in Major League Baseball history to ever homer 3 or more times in 6 consecutive games is the 87 O's. There's a couple more teams with 5 straight games, including the O's right now. So if they go yard 3 times or more in Kansas City on Friday night, they will tie their own all-time record. This time it was Gunnar Henderson hitting a leadoff home run for the second time this season, just blasting a fastball from Pablo Lopez, 108 off the bat, 416 feet to right center field to give the Orioles immediately a 1-0 lead. And then the even bigger homer was Anthony Santander after the Twins had gotten 2 runs in the top of the 7th to take a 2-1 lead. Santander comes up from the right side of the plate against Steven Okert and rips a ball into left field just to the right of the big wall, which helped him out just kind of into the bullpen area. 107 off the bat, 402 feet for Santander, whose bat is finally heating up a bit. That tied the game at 2. And then, of course, Mullins with the walk-off homer in the 9th to win it. The 3 long balls for the Orioles. Third thing, though, that you need to know from this one is that otherwise the Orioles offense was completely held down. Again, their 4 runs came from 2 solo homers and a 2-run shot. They really never even got a rally going. I would say the only other rally for the Orioles was in the 7th inning. After Santander had the solo shot to tie the game, they got singles from Mountcastle and from Cowser, and they put a couple of runners on with 2 outs. Unfortunately, Jordan Westberg struck out and they couldn't take the lead, but that was pretty much it. After Pablo Lopez, who is really the Twins' ace, gave up that leadoff homer to Gunnar Henderson, the only other base runner he allowed after that was a Jordan Westberg infield single in the 3rd inning. He retired 18 of the next 19 batters before coming out of the game. And honestly, I was shocked he came out of the game. I mean, I know the Twins bullpen is fairly well rested. They've had a really good bullpen so far this season, but Lopez was dealing 6 innings, 1 run, 2 hits, 7 Ks, no walks, and he had only thrown 87 pitches through those 6 innings. The Twins got him the lead in the top of the 7th. I thought for sure he would come back out there against the middle of the Orioles order. It just didn't happen. The Twins went to the bullpen, and that's when the O's strike. They immediately jump on Steven Okert. They get the run. They almost get more, and then, of course, get the 2 in the 9th. I thought Lopez had at least 1 more good inning out of him, but O's offense really struggled to figure him out after Gunnar hit the home run. Fourth thing you need to know from Wednesday's win is that, of course, Albert Suárez was just awesome in this one. Awesome. Suarez, who was the player the Orioles called up on Wednesday to replace Tyler Wells. Wells, who went on the injured list Tuesday, was the scheduled starter for Wednesday. O's needed a pitcher. We talked on today's episode with all the options, what the Orioles could have done. They ended up going Albert Suárez, and he was tremendous. 5 2/3 scoreless innings, 3 hits, 4 Ks, no walks on 75 pitches. I'll dive deeper into his start coming up on this episode in a little bit. But man, what an Orioles debut that was from Albert Suárez. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 4-2 walk-off win over the Twins on Wednesday is that the bullpen was a little shaky early when it came in for Albert Suárez, but they finished strong and helped the Orioles win this game. Now, the O's first went to Danny Coulombe in the 6th inning to relieve Suarez. I thought it was the right move. Suarez was dealing, and he had only thrown 75 pitches, but you got to remember, you're bringing a guy up from AAA who hasn't pitched in the big league since 2017. You're kind of playing with house money at that point. A lefty comes up with a runner on first and 2 outs. I mean, what a play that was, but Albert Suárez to get the out at third, which we'll talk about later. But you got Danny Coulombe rested and ready to go. You bring him in, and he didn't just look like himself. He goes 2-0 to Alex Kirilloff, and then gets Kirilloff to ground out to end the inning, keep the O's up 1-0. And then Coulombe comes back out there in the top of the 7th and just gets behind a hitter, gives up a hard hit grounder, luckily right back to him. And then after that, it was a 4-pitch walk to Manuel Margot, where he wasn't even close to the strike zone. And that was Danny Coulomb's first walk of the season. That's how good he had been. He had come in to Wednesday's outing, 6 1/3 innings, 1 run, 2 hits, 9 Ks, and no walks on the season. And that first walk was a 4-pitch walk where really like none of the 4 pitches were close. So I thought at that point, it's like, okay, the righties are coming up. Coulomb looks off. Let's get him out of the game. And Brandon Hyde went to Jacob Webb, who, maybe you don't want Webb out there in a 1-0 game in the 7th, but he's been so good so far this year. Coming into the game, 8 1/3 innings, 1 run, 5 hits, 7 Ks, and 2 walks. He's been great and just didn't have his good stuff. Allows an RBI double from Austin Martin where, maybe a good relay throw from Gunnar Henderson to the plate gets the out at home and keeps the 1-0 lead. Wasn't a great throw. The run scored. He gets a strikeout. He gets 1 strike away from getting out Kyle Farmer and keeping the game tied, but he hangs a changeup and Farmer gets the RBI single to make it 2-1 Minnesota. Keegan Aiken did a nice job of then coming in, getting a strikeout to finally end that 7th inning. And that is where kind of the bullpen flipped. It wasn't good days for Webb and Coulomb, but that was okay because Yennier Cano came in the 8th and got himself a couple of strikeouts and he looked good. And then Craig Kimbrell, who does sometimes struggle in non-save situations, came in a tie game in the top of the 9th, but he did well. Another 1-2-3 inning with a strikeout for Kimbrell. And that just kept the game going for the Orioles. And what was really important there with not only the O's bullpen pitching well, but Mullins hitting the walk-off homer and the Orioles winning it in the 9th is that the O's would have been in a really tough situation bullpen-wise had that game gone to extras. Craig Kimbrell does not throw more than 1 inning. So you would have been left with, because they had already used 5 relievers, Dylan Tate, Johan Ramirez, and Mike Baumann remaining in the bullpen. Ramirez, who threw 30 pitches on Tuesday, was not available, so he wasn't an option at all. And Baumann threw like 20 pitches Tuesday, probably could have pitched in an emergency. But we've already seen how bad Baumann's been this year. You don't want to throw him out there, especially not in extra innings. So your one option was Dylan Tate. And I trust Dylan Tate, but he's kind of a contact pitcher, which doesn't play as well when you have the zombie runner on second. And say you go to the 11th, like, what do you do then? Dylan Tate for a second inning, and then you're kind of out of pitchers. So the O's would have been in a really tough spot. The Twins had way more good relievers available had it gone to extras. So it was huge that the O's bullpen got it to the 9th and that Cedric Mullins and the O's won it in the 9th to avoid extra innings. But a big part of all of this, a big part of this win was what Albert Suárez came up and did on Wednesday. And coming up next, I'm going to break down his outing and talk about, okay, what does his future look like? Because he pitched so well, this might not just be a spot start. This might be a guy who helps out the Orioles all season. And I'll break that down coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Policygenius. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies starting at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options even offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. And if you're a parent or a caregiver, like, this is the place for you. You want that life insurance to take care of your loved ones. Policygenius is the place to go. And you can talk to a team of award-winning agents who will walk you through step-by-step the process. I know life insurance can be scary. Policygenius will help you out. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonmd or the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. Again, that's policygenius.com/lockedonmlb. And this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. And, I'm a pretty competitive guy. I've talked about it. My competitive side, though, is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. And it's a great twist on Monopoly, where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is you can mess with your friends, charge them rent on iconic properties, just like in the classic game. But now you can also heist their vaults of riches for yourself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free, on the App Store or Google Play. So the Orioles won it in walk-off fashion, 4-2 over the Twins on Wednesday afternoon to complete the sweep of this three-game series against Minnesota. And a big part of this win was what Albert Suárez was able to do on the mound for the Orioles. Now, I talked about it, if you listen to Wednesday's episode with the Orioles, what they were going to do Wednesday. Tyler Wells, shortly before Tuesday's game, it was announced that he was going on the 15-day injured list with right elbow inflammation. And that means the Orioles needed a starter because he was scheduled to start Wednesday's game. Because the other four starters were not going to be on regular rest because the O's haven't had an off day in a little while, the O's needed to bring a pitcher up from AAA to make it happen. We knew whoever came up was going to replace David Banuelos, who had a cool moment, made his major league debut Tuesday night, but did get DFA'd to make room for the pitcher. And as I talked about on Wednesday's episode, my prediction was that most likely Bruce Zimmerman was going to be the guy, because although Zimmerman's ceiling isn't too high anymore, the O's kind of know what they have there. He's already on the 40-man roster. He has options. So it would have been easy to just bring him up, start one game, and send him back down to AAA. That's what I thought. But I did talk about Albert Suárez kind of being the number two option for me. And my hesitancy was the Orioles really like Albert Suárez. And if he comes up and gets added to the 40-man roster, you can't just easily send him back down. He would have to be DFA'd, and another team would almost certainly claim him on waivers, and you basically lose him just for one spot start. And I thought the Orioles would think that's not worth it. Well, they chose Albert Suárez, the 34-year-old right-hander who the Orioles signed to a minor league deal last September, brought him back. He really shined in spring training for the O's this year. He is the guy they went to. And what that tells me that the O's went to him is they're not just asking Albert Suárez for a spot start here on a Wednesday. They're thinking he's going to have a bigger role and stick with the big league team going forward, because I don't think the O's are just going to give up on him just like that. And especially not after what he did on Wednesday. I'll read out the line again. 5 2/3 innings of scoreless baseball, 3 hits, 4 strikeouts, no walks, 75 pitches thrown, only 7 hard hit balls by Twins hitters against him in this one. And he just came out firing. Like in the first inning, he got 5 whiffs on 7 swings. He threw 10 pitches, all fastballs, 5 whiffs on it. He was 96, 97 in the first inning, just blowing away Twins hitters. And that set the tone for this game. Yeah, there was a couple of jams he got out of, but really it was a pretty squeaky clean 5 2/3 innings. And the fastball was the pitch that kind of amazed us when we saw him in spring training. And Suárez, kind of a crazy story. He was in the minor leagues for 8 years and then finally got to the big leagues with the Giants in 2016. He pitched in like kind of an up and down role with San Francisco as a starter and a reliever in 2016 and 2017. And then he was released, and he never made it back to the big leagues again until Wednesday. 7 years later, almost, he gets back to the bigs. He had pitched in AAA. He had pitched in the KBO in Korea. He had pitched in Japan and had really good numbers overseas. And you can make more money there than you can in AAA, and kind of revived his career. When the Orioles brought him in last year, they saw some really good stuff that he could throw. And we saw it in spring training this year. And we certainly saw it on Wednesday. I mean, there was a chance at one point we thought Suárez might be making the opening day roster. That's how dominant at times he was down in Sarasota. But he finally gets this chance, and he was great. That fastball, he threw it 47 of his 75 pitches. That's 63% of the time was the fastball. He used to throw 93, 94 when he was in the big leagues last time. He averaged 96 and was up to 98 with that 4-seam fastball on Wednesday. That's how much he has changed his game. Got 11 whiffs on that fastball alone. Then it was like kind of a slider cutter hybrid that he threw. It was like, 86 to 90, anywhere from there. And he dropped in a few changeups. I honestly thought the changeup looked really good. He only threw it 7 times, and then he punched in 4 curveballs, including 1 for a strikeout. But it was really mostly fastball cutter. That fastball is ridiculous. I really like the changeup. I think I want to see more than just 7 changeups the next time Suárez throws that seem to be effective against left-handers. But he had no fear. He attacked hitters. He did hit 1 batter that was in the 6th inning, but he didn't walk anybody and went after the strike zone. And to be honest with you, it's kind of twofold, because A, if the Orioles are calling him up to make this start, they don't think John Means is going to be ready by next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, the 23rd in Anaheim, would be the next start that would be Tyler Wells' spot. It could have been John Means. They probably didn't think he was ready anyway. And then Means did get roughed up in his rehab start Wednesday night in Norfolk. We'll talk about that a little bit more on tomorrow's episode. But Suárez, you would think is at least getting another start Tuesday night against the Angels. Like, that's going to be happening here. And it could be even better for Suarez after that, which we'll get to in a second. But he just went after hitters. It's a heavy fastball approach. That fastball, I mean, it's got a lot of ride to it, like from left to right, but it's not a two-seamer like that. It kind of rides almost up and to the right. It's kind of a crazy pitch movement profile-wise. And that is why, not just with the velocity, but with the movement, so many Twins hitters had such an issue just even making good contact with that fastball. They swung through it. They popped up a lot of balls, a lot of lazy fly balls Suarez got in this game. It was just fun to watch him attack hitters like that. I mean, he said after the game, like, you know, this was even more fun than when he made his actual major league debut back in 2016, getting to the big leagues. The standing ovation he got from the Orioles fans when he came out of the game, 1-0 lead in the 6th inning, was just amazing. To know what he had gone through, to know what he just gave to this team, that was an awesome ovation. And I got to shout him out for the play he made that finished his outing. He had hit a batter with 1 out, and then a wild pitch had gotten that batter to second with 1 away. He gets a ground ball that's not right back to the mound. It's kind of over to the third base side, but it's clearly Suarez's ball. He gets off the mound well. He fields the ball, and you're thinking, oh, any pitcher is going to set his feet, throw to first. Yeah, the runner will go to third, but he'll get the second out of the inning, and he'll try to get the next batter. And Suarez probably knew Danny Coulombe was coming in next, so it's like, yeah, I get the out at first. Coulombe can come in and get this batter and avoid the hit. Suarez picks it up, and in one motion, does a spin move and throws a strike over to third base. Westberg standing right there, and they tag out the runner trying to go from second to third, which was not only a huge play because instead of 2 outs runner on third, it's 2 outs runner on first. Now Coulombe got a ground out anyway, but in that spot, you allowed Coulombe to come in and give up a hit and still not have the run score. And the other thing is, like, who's even thinking to make that play? Because honestly, throwing to first is still kind of the right play there. And then the athleticism by Suarez at 34, hasn't been in the big leagues in 7 years, to pick it up, spin, and make a perfect throw to third base. That was almost as impressive as all the strikeouts and the fastballs that he threw. I mean, I was severely impressed. I don't want to get up over my skis after one big league start for a guy. Like, he certainly probably will regress to the mean at some point here. But he did enough to deserve at least another start in this Orioles rotation. And I think he's going to get it. But the question is, what happens after that? If Suarez is even close to this good in what's most likely going to be a second start next week, what do the O's do with him? And that's what I'll try to answer coming up next. Where can Suarez fit on this team moving forward? Is there a spot for him? We'll get to that to finish off the pod. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Now, we are into the Major League Baseball season. You don't want to miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond to your Prize Picks entries. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, take your pick of just more or less. That's all you do at Prize Picks. You look at a stat for a player or a team, more or less. That's all you got to do. And then you can win money up to 100 times your money. Even with the NBA playoffs starting, the NHL playoffs starting, they've got Prize Picks entries as well. It is that easy, more or less. That's all you got to do. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100 at Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So after Albert Suárez was absolutely fantastic in his Orioles debut on Wednesday afternoon, 5 2/3 scoreless, the question is, what is now his future with the Orioles? Because I had talked about it on yesterday's episode. Like, I thought the Orioles liked Suarez too much, right? They really valued what he could do. They think they can make him better, to just bring him up, have him make one spot start, and DFA him and most likely lose him on waivers to another team. I just didn't think it would happen. Well, they did call him up, and what that told me is, okay, they need Suarez for at least 2 starts, and it hasn't been confirmed yet, but after John Means kind of struggled and doesn't need to be activated yet, I think it's more than likely that Suarez will again take Wells's place on Tuesday night in the next start around in Anaheim against the Angels, and that's probably going to happen. But then the question is, okay, what happens after that? Even if he doesn't go, 6 scoreless innings again, even if he's just like solid and pitches well and keeps the Orioles in the game, what do you do after that? Because Wells' spot is open. He's on the 15-day injured list. Now, we got good news from Brandon Hyde on Tuesday, talking about how he doesn't think it'll be a crazy long stint for Tyler Wells on the injured list. It was retroactive to April 14th, which means you could activate him on April 29th if all goes well and he doesn't need to do any rehab and he can just come back. Now, you never know with elbow stuff what's going to go on there with Tyler Wells. It seems like it was more precautionary than anything, but you don't know. It could take more than the 15 days. It makes for a really interesting conversation. The next turn after Tuesday for Tyler Wells' spot would be April 29th at home against the Yankees, which of course would be the day the Orioles could activate Tyler Wells off the injured list. So if they think he's fine, they could bring him back. If they don't think he's fine, maybe they go Albert Suárez that day. They could also go John Means that day because it seems like Means will probably make at least one more rehab start. But John Means needs to be activated by April 30th. That is when the 30 days allotted to a rehab stint is up. April 30th, right after April 29th. So that 29th date could be Wells, could be Suarez, could be Means. A lot of decisions for the Orioles to make in the next 11 days. What I think could happen there is they maybe let Wells simmer on the IL a little bit longer. Maybe they give Suarez that third start, April 29th, and then they make the decision because the next day, April 30th, they have to make the Means decision. And also Wells could be ready to come off the injured list as well. So I think Suarez could actually get 2 more starts before the Orioles make that final decision. But then it's going to be a tough call. I got to tell you, though, even if Wells comes back fairly quickly, and even if Means does get activated by April 30th and the Orioles want to add him back to this rotation, I think if Suarez is looking like this, the O's are going to find a place on the roster for him. Now, it might not be as a starter, but let's say Means and Wells come back right there at the end of April. I think you could put Means in the rotation, you could put Suarez in the rotation, and you could move Wells and Irvin to the bullpen. Now, the question is, who do you take out of the bullpen? Honestly, right now, Mike Bauman's one of them for me. I mean, he's just not pitching well. And the other one, Yohan Ramirez has impressed me, but we don't know how long he's going to do that. The other one could easily be Yohan Ramirez. Either way, Irvin and Wells make your bullpen better. Now, if Wells doesn't come back that quickly, which is certainly possible, I think the addition of Suarez means there's still a bullpen competition between Ramirez and Bauman to try and hold on to that final bullpen spot. I think that could certainly happen over these next few weeks. There's a lot of ways the Orioles can go here. Now, one thing they can't do is just option Suarez or Means or Irvin down to AAA. None of those guys have options left. They would have to go on waivers, and the O's aren't going to put those guys on waivers. So they all have to stay on the big league roster once they're all healthy at some point. And I think the O's can find a way to have them all on the roster and contributing to this team. I think Cole Irvin, who I think is lined up to start Saturday, April 27th against the A's, I think that's probably his last start in the rotation. You got Suarez, you got Means coming back, maybe Wells coming back. I think that is when after that, Irvin does get moved to the bullpen. And then you're activating Means. And the other thing here is Kyle Bradish. Kyle Bradish had a good first rehab start on Tuesday night. He could be ready by mid-May, potentially to rejoin the Orioles rotation. That's another question you got to answer. But here's how I'm feeling right now. Healthy Tyler Wells in the bullpen. Healthy Cole Irvin in the bullpen. Healthy Albert Suarez. I mean, maybe in the rotation, but at the very least, the way his fastball plays and the way he likes to throw that pitch, I think he would play well out of the bullpen as well. And honestly, it would be better than what they're getting right now from Mike Bauman. It could be better than what you're getting from Jacob Webb or from Yohan Ramirez. It could easily be an upgrade. And I think in the long run, if the Orioles had Irvin, Wells, Suarez replace Bauman, Ramirez, and Webb in the bullpen, and then you had Bradish and Means in the rotation, I think your team gets better. And then you still have all of Suarez, Wells, and Irvin who can give you multiple innings out of the bullpen, but can also come up and start for you if, Means or Bradish do start feeling some setbacks or aren't fully recovered or whatever it may be. You get more depth on the big league roster. Now, it's going to mean some tough decisions. But if Albert Suarez is going to pitch like this, he's, I think, getting at least one more start and might even get 2 more starts before the Orioles make the final decision. But if he pitches like this, you can't get rid of him. Even if you do eventually move him to the bullpen, you can't take him off this roster. And if he's given you 6 scoreless innings, I don't think you can even remove him from the rotation until at least he shows you that he's not going to do that consistently. I don't know if Albert Suárez, this is one outing, right? I don't know if he's going to stick with this team all year. He could turn into a pumpkin. He could regress. And if he does, I don't think the Orioles would be hurt that much by DFAing him after he shows a larger sample of, okay, I'm not ready to be a big league pitcher again. But if he looks like this, the O's need pitching. And you still can't count. I still don't think you can count on John Means and Kyle Bradish both coming back and being fully healthy and being consistent contributors to your rotation every fifth day for the rest of the year. I don't think you can count on that. You just can't. These injuries are too fickle. You can't count on it. So to have Wells and Irvin be there, and hopefully Wells comes back, and if he doesn't come back for a while, that makes Suarez even more valuable. But even if Wells does come back, having Suarez there as an option is a huge asset. And I really do think his stuff could play pretty well out of that Oriole bullpen. Better than Mike Bauman's stuff, I'll tell you right now. So if Suarez is pitching at least close to this well, I mean, he could stick with this Orioles team for the rest of the season. Like, there's no ceiling on this thing for Albert Suárez. And again, I could be getting way over my skis here, but there's a chance for him to stick around. If he pitches well, he's going to hold this roster spot. The O's are going to find a way to keep him on this roster, and it might be at the expense of a guy like Bauman or Yohan Ramirez. It might just happen. So, especially Bauman, he better get it together because Suarez, wants to stay in the rotation, but long-term, this is Suarez taking Bauman's job. It's not what he wants, but it's all about performance when you're trying to win a World Series. And that performance from Suarez was unbelievable for the circumstances on Wednesday. And hopefully he can follow it up on Tuesday if he starts again. After that, that's when we can really start breaking down, okay, what can he really do to stick around with his Orioles team? But it's going to be interesting. Just another piece to the puzzle for the O's in Albert Suarez. But that'll do it for today's episode. Orioles are, of course, off today before traveling to Kansas City for a weekend series. We'll still have an episode coming up tomorrow. We will preview that series between the Orioles and the Royals, already the second time they've met this season. We'll talk a bit more about John Means, his rehab start Wednesday. We'll talk a bit more about Kyle Bradish and his timeline. We got a good update on Cionel Perez and him possibly returning to the bullpen to continue to shake things up on what the Orioles can do. We'll talk about all of that and more coming up on tomorrow's episode to finish off the podcast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube page and leave a 5-star rating and a review wherever you listen to the pod. And I will be back with you tomorrow. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.